IION is a regional innovation center, your business catalyst, partner, and advisor. This is the IION's Featured Client Podcast.
My name is Rachel Clark. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of SKADI Cyber Defense Corporation. We are a cybersecurity firm in Gravenhurst, Ontario, and we provide full end-to-end cybersecurity operation centers to small and medium-sized businesses.
Today we have Rachel Clark from SKADI Cyber Security. Welcome to the studio.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm a pleasure to be here.
And Matt from IION, you're going to give us a little bit more of a background. This is a new client for the funding agency.
That's right. So Rachel, actually, we were introduced via a government contact.
That's right.
And said, we have a relatively new startup business in cybersecurity. Is there anything that you're able to do? And then I think we established a connection, went back and forth a few times on emails. We had one of our capital programs open at the time, and we thought, hey, this is a way that, we're able to support you in your startup phase. What do you need? And at that time, you were looking at creating your professional branding. So we helped on the creation of a couple trade show booths so that you could be in more than one spot at one time and represent yourself in a professional manner. So that was our first interaction. And we were talking off camera, microphone, a little bit before we started here, just about, how long actually you've been in operation. And actually it's been much longer than that, given your cumulative experience you're bringing to the business. But the business itself is about 8 months, is that?
Yeah, just a little bit over 8 months. Really, though, a little bit of story, if I can tell you about that. I was working for State Street, which is a huge bank in the United States. And I was sitting on the beach in the Dominican Republic on vacation. And I read a story about how a small business was hit by cyber threat and went into bankruptcy. And it really disturbed me as a cybersecurity professional how we are failing some small and medium-sized businesses in terms of how we're protecting them. And I started to think, what is the bank doing that small and medium-sized businesses can't do? Well, they have a lot of people, process, and technology. So my thought was, how do I make that accessible to small and medium-sized businesses? So I spent a good year going through building a platform, making some strategic partnerships with folks so that when we launched and I actually delivered it to my clients, we would have a product that was fully realized. So even though, 8 months have gone by, we've really started this process long before that, working to it. I guess it's kind of like writing a book, right? Yeah.
That makes sense.
And you had 35 years of experience and you innovating really with your woman-run business.
Yeah.
And the name, give us a little bit of background on the name and why you chose it.
Yeah, SKADI is the Norwegian goddess of bow hunting in winter. And because we're located in Muskoka, we thought it was very appropriate because those two things happen in Muskoka. But also SKADI is a very strong female character. She's the from the north. She's, a Norse goddess. Really, we wanted to convey that women have a place in the cybersecurity space. And I have an excellent company actually run by my cousin who did all the branding. It's amazing and wonderful. I'll show you some of it after. But it's really helped us to define who we are as a company. I want people, when they see the branding, to know right away that it's SKADI and what we're about. And I think that was the important thing to do.
And you're heading off to do some very interesting presentations at a very high level. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm going to be speaking. So I'm going to CyberSec and InfoSec Europe, and I'm going to be speaking about artificial intelligence while I'm there. Artificial intelligence, of course, is having a big impact in the cybersecurity world because, we use artificial intelligence tools in order to do things like threat response. When threat actors get into your environment, how do we respond to them? But we also have to remember that threat actors have the same technology that we have. So as we're using artificial intelligence to do some of our counter cyber security things, we also have to recognize that threat actors are using it to get in. And let me give you a really good example of that. back in the day, and when I say back in the day, I mean maybe 3 years ago, we were inundated by phishing, and we still are in some respects. The phishing, though, back then was very easy to recognize because it had broken English. The links didn't make sense. The language wasn't there around how to do it. I mean, people were still duped by that, but still, it was very rough. But now with artificial intelligence, that problem goes away for the threat actor, and they really are having more and more ability to craft phishing emails that look realistic. And we also have to think about privacy in terms of how our information is, being protected from a privacy perspective, because these AI models train themselves on data. And some of the data they train themselves on is coming from places like Facebook and Instagram. And, really we're entering a new threshold of privacy that I think we need to think about and start talking about.
Yes, my Netflix account has been compromised 100 times in the last month. I bet you, the amount of emails I get. So I completely see what you mean, and they look very real.
Oh yeah, they're getting better and better and better at doing this, and social engineering is a big deal, and artificial intelligence certainly helps with social engineering. Deep fakes, as an example, one of my employees received a note from me allegedly that said, could you go buy me some gift cards because I'm with a client and I forgot my wallet, right? But these are common things that happen to everybody, but a lot of people fall for them. In our case, we have very complicated detection systems to realize this, so it doesn't actually get to the employee. But it was interesting to me as a thought exercise about how threat actors are trying to get into our environments.
I have a question, because out of curiosity, because how is it, we just, one of our other series from our clients on this series, I should say, is in the mining industry. And we were just speaking with him about, the resistance to change a little bit within that industry. Do you meet some of that when trying to sell your product? Because I liken it to almost insurance. You don't want to pay for it until you need it, right? Like, so is there some resistance to adopting?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that we really tried to do is not just make it technologically accessible, but also financially accessible. I think there's a lot of thought out there because, and this is the bill of goods that's been sold to small and medium-sized businesses forever. I'm going to sell you a firewall and an antivirus product and you're good, but didn't think about all the other things that could have happened in that. And so really what we're trying to do is we're trying to get our arms around all of that, all the vulnerability scanning, the pen testing, the dark web scanning. Do you have compromised credentials on the dark web? Are they talking about your company on the dark web? I did a whole thing yesterday for a client where I could see, threat actors talking about, their plans. And you can't do counter cybersecurity if you don't know what's going on. All that stuff is important. And so when I come in there and I say, really, I'm going to do everything for you, you don't have to worry about it anymore. If you're in the business of, let's say that you have a bakery, I don't want you to worry about cybersecurity. Let me worry about it. And so how I approach that situation is I tell clients, yes, we do cybersecurity, but I'm really in the risk transference business. My goal is to transfer the cybersecurity risk from you to me so that you can get on with the business of baking bread and running your business and not have to worry about cybersecurity.
How big a company needs to have cybersecurity?
I have clients as little as 1 and as big as 1,000. So, but typically they run around 50, 60 endpoints altogether.
How much would a very small company with just one server need to pay? It's like an insurance policy, it sounds like.
Yeah, we charge only $30 US per endpoint per month. So let's say that you have an office. Let's go back to the bakery example. You have an office with 10 computers, 1 server, and you're running a bakery. Well, we would charge you 11 times $30 US per month for the whole year. So really also you have to keep in mind, I think off the top of my head as a small business owner, you're thinking about it and you're saying, well, that seems expensive to me. But there are things you can do once you hire us. You can get rid of your antivirus. You can go to your insurance company and say, I have full end-to-end protection now on my cybersecurity. I don't want to pay what I'm paying in cyber insurance anymore. They'll often reduce that rate for you because it's less risky, right, for them. And when you really think about it, after you've done all of this, work that we help all of our clients with, what you end up with is you're finding out that really SKADI is almost free to use. For me, it's about democratizing cybersecurity. To me, everybody has the right to have some kind of really great cybersecurity. And a lot of the cybersecurity companies are focused on enterprise markets. And enterprise markets only make up 10% of all the companies. Small businesses run Canada as they run the United States. Really important that we start bringing our arms around those companies to do that. And we've always been transparent about our pricing. It's on our website. So that's why I'm not worried about telling you.
Well, that's very interesting because while you're talking, I'm adding up all the different costs I have and whether or not it's that helpful because even Norton antivirus, which I have, it's fairly pricey, seems to me. And it really doesn't protect me from me being stupid and clicking on the wrong email.
Yeah.
Right? And then because I'm a home business as well as this stuff, I have a lot to lose, and they can access my business account and other things. And there's nothing other than Norton, and if I don't update it right, protecting me. And I don't have insurance for, that kind of thing.
It's almost two different things, right? Like the antivirus isn't cybersecurity and vice versa, right? Like it's almost like, would you still, so you're saying that, by utilizing your service, you could drop the antivirus.
So our endpoint protection product does antivirus, anti-malware, and anti-ransomware. So you don't need to run two of those on your system if I'm protecting you. And I'm, in this case, I'm updating the client for you.
Right.
You never have to worry about it. We do it every day. We update clients with different things. So it's something you don't have to worry about. I think I want to be just very clear that there is no panacea for cyber threat. Anybody who is out there saying, I will solve cyber threat for you, they're not being truthful. And I think that there are places out there that talk about that and talk about it in that way. I can't 100% protect you from cyber threat, nor can anybody. But what I can do is I can minimize the risk to a level where it's acceptable or salient, or if you do have a cybersecurity incident, we have plans and playbooks in place that we can use to minimize the risk to you. So again, it's all about minimizing risk and transferring risk, less about, I can't be everything to you or, protect you 100%. It's just not possible. Yeah. We're here, we're local. We have data centers all over the world. We can run on Google Cloud, AWS, or Azure. We really have to look at the situations going on. I challenge anyone who's listening to this podcast to pick up the paper every day, create a Google alert about cybersecurity. Yeah. And every day you're going to see someone getting attacked again. London drugs, the hospitals in Windsor, city of Toronto even.
Well, the Capital Center here in North Bay had a security, had a data breach. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
And that there was an issue. I hear about different ones in a lot of different places.
I get an email every other week about some subscription service that I have that's been, hacked, and the information's been leaked. Yeah.
Let me tell you a little story about that too, because I think the general consensus amongst the populace is, well, as a municipality gets ransomwared, they have to pay this exorbitant ransom. They typically either pay it or don't pay it. Oftentimes they've been very confidential about whether they pay those ransoms. But the money made, so the threat actor doesn't just stop at paying a ransom. Let's say you pay a ransom of $1 million, right? They also will go in and they'll sell the data that they've gotten from the data breach, usually include social insurance numbers, people's IDs, passwords to computing systems, passwords to your Netflix account, et cetera, et cetera. They sell those on the deep dark web, and they use all of that money to fund things that are making our society worse. The World Economic Forum last year came out with a report. They said that cyber threat will be responsible for losses totaling $10.2 trillion in 2025. And if you think about that on a more global level, that is more than the GDP of every country in the world except the United States and China. So it is a very serious problem. And these things are funding things like human trafficking, fentanyl coming across the border, Vladimir Putin's war in Russia, right? Completely being funded by cyber threat. There's all kinds of societal problems that come with cyber threat that we just don't realize. So when I see, as a cybersecurity professional, someone getting hit by ransomware, well, first, I want to do everything I can to help them. But secondly, I also realize that there's a much bigger societal impact that's going on with that, and why I think that everybody from the smallest business to the largest corporation has to really start taking it seriously.
Well, this podcast series is mostly about explaining the how you help companies and how companies can access different programs. But this is a really important discussion. It not only shows the importance of the funding a new company that's doing important work, right? And right at the ground level.
Yeah, and especially, women entrepreneurs, and in Northern Ontario, a tech business in Northern Ontario. So, you kind of got the double-headed check marks there too, right? So I think that's fantastic. And, the more women entrepreneurs that we can support, especially in tech or tech businesses in general in Northern Ontario, is a win. Typically, Northern Ontario hasn't been a hotbed for
it should be.
tech-based companies.
Here's why. Can I tell you why?
Please do.
We're in Gravenhurst. If you were to take I don't know if you remember in high school, you'd had that compass that you would be able to draw circles with. If you put the point of it in Gravenhurst, extend it out 300 kilometers on a map, and you draw a circle, it hits every major metropolitan area in Ontario. So, Toronto, Ottawa, North Bay here, Windsor, London, et cetera, et cetera. So we can go as far north as Sudbury, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that Northern Ontario is the perfect place for cybersecurity. We have an airport, we have high-speed internet pretty much universally in most of the areas in which we live. I think that, we have to start looking at our Northern Ontario environment, the very important work that's going on in trades and mining and things. But, the issue is that a lot of our tech professionals are moving to Toronto, or moving to Ottawa, et cetera, when we can really keep them right here and build a tech ecosystem, a cybersecurity ecosystem right here in Northern Ontario. And that's important for me, and that's why I started the business in Gravenhurst and not in Toronto, which I could have well done, because I just think it's so important. I love this place, and I want to make it successful.
I remember a story I did with the Nugget. I was with them for quite a while, and when Vic Fideli was trying to find a use for the underground hole, Nord Sage, and one of the selling points that he had on trying to get like Microsoft here to data storage safety and was that we have a double loop of capacity for the internet here because of the military base. Right? Something like that?
Yes.
So there's actually the infrastructure for a central type of thing here.
Yeah. And where I am in Muskoka as an example, that area has been completely reliant on cottage traffic in the summer and trades. As seniors, most of our community is senior citizens. As, the cycle of life goes through, what are we going to do to make sure we're having sustainability in Muskoka? That's beyond tourism and trade, and completely not disparaging any of that whatsoever. Very important industries to where we are. But, technology is the future. You heard me say there's a huge problem. We can solve it right here. We can solve it in North Bay. We can solve it in Muskoka. We can solve it in Sudbury, right? Well, I want to key on something that you said. There is an air of we're okay because we're just North Bay. Like, who's going to break into who cares about my business in North Bay? And what I will say to you is that criminals are opportunists. If they find out that they can get into your network, they will. And they've been enormously successful in this. And the only reason that you haven't been hit with cyber threat is just because there's so much of it out there that they just haven't had time or opportunity to do that. But it's coming, and you need to be aware of that, and you need to protect yourself.
Any small town municipality, they have lots to lose, right? Especially when you're looking at a ransomware thing. Even an individual like myself, if they have access into my bank accounts and all of a sudden I have to find I'm under siege, right?
It's interesting because everyone, regardless of, which is interesting to hear you narrow it down to location, but once you're online, right? You're anywhere, right? So once you're using your subscription-based on cloud-based model that everyone's kind of on now, your information, if you're storing your credit cards there, you're online. It's not like they physically have to drive to Northern Ontario, right? So everyone's vulnerable regardless, I would argue, and correct me if I'm wrong, of location. It doesn't.
Yeah, location is not a consideration for cyber criminals. Typically, they've been operating out of places like Nigeria, Romania, Malaysia, etc. You've heard about pig butchering scams on television. If you haven't, just a short synopsis is they make a relationship with you and they feed you whatever you want to hear for a certain amount of time, and then when they feel the time is right, they take you for your money. These things operate with the intention of trying to take your money away from you or take organizations' money away from you. We have to recognize that cyber criminals are better at this than most everybody because they work on it 24/7. They're well-funded. There's oodles of opportunity for them. And we have to be proactive instead of reactive about how we're dealing with cyber threat. This is the idea behind SKADI, is that we're providing proactive cyber defense and not reactive cyber defense. So we're trying to stop threat before it starts, and we're constantly innovating on our platform in order to make sure that we're able to manage new threat when it comes in. So we're working on some very cool technology right now to do just that. We work on it 24/7 too. So now we're at the same playing field as the threat actor, right? We're able to go through and build new technologies and do counter defense and be at the forefront of making sure that we're repelling attacks to your organization. And that's really exciting for me.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is exciting.
I guess it would change all the time, right? You're pushing updates constantly based on new events that you're learning that are transpiring, et cetera.
And we take in hundreds of articles every day about cyber threat. I think we take in 100,000 or more threat intelligence feeds every single day. Wow. When we bring in an article where someone has recognized that there's new cyber threat, we're able to make analytics that will detect that threat before it gets out into the wild. We're getting very close to being able to remediate close to zero-day threat. Zero-day threat is when a software provider, a vulnerability is found in a software provider's application before the software provider knows about it.
Oh, wow.
So threat actors, they do these things where they try to find exploits that they can use in people's software. It used to be that, the software company would put out these things every Tuesday. Some of them still do. But now we're finding the zero-day threat is becoming such a prevalent part. We're constantly trying to keep up with that.
Now, the other day I was contacted by somebody on Facebook that was a name that I was familiar with. It was obvious to me that somebody had just adopted that name. And they said, hey, I'm reaching out to, I broke my leg and I'm going to need some help. And then that same day, I got an email under the same name, and they were saying that I'm reaching out, my niece needs this, that, or the other thing. Right. And it was like, oh, I know what's going on. But as a journalist, I was kind of curious. I took the risk of just saying, "Oh, what are you reaching out for?" on the email, because I figured my email was a little bit better protected than my phone for the Facebook or whatever. And I've heard that someone can send you a text. You don't even have to open it or anything like that. As soon as you touch it, they're in. Where are they at with that as far as emails? Because I didn't connect. I didn't hit any links
or downloads.
There's a lot to unpack in what you just said.
Yeah, I bet.
Let me start with the first thing.
Yeah.
When a cyber criminal gets a hold of your username and password, and there's all kinds of tools, you can do this yourself on the internet to see if you've been exposed. Have I been PWND, I think is one. Pwned, I think that's what that stands for. Dehashed is another one. You can go through and you can find your information on the internet. People have a tendency to do what's convenient for them, and their tendency is to use the same password, even if it's a complex password, on all the sites that they use. The problem with that, though, is that when threat actors have data breaches from different places, they sell this information on the internet. Sorry, your information is then they have your password, so they just start using it in every site that you might possibly go to, and eventually they get through, and they do that. So really important that, and I tell people this, you use a different password and make it as complex as you can on every single site. There are some really good tools to do this. 1Password is one of them. LastPass is another one. LastPass had a security breach recently, so people have tended not to use them, but I still like their product and what they're doing. It's just a way to maintain all of these passwords in a single place where you don't have to remember them. So if it does get breached, I can't go to like your bank account and try the same password or go. The other thing is that everyone should have two-factor authentication on everything that they use. Two-factor authentication, when you try to log in, it sends you a text message to your mobile device to do that. That way, if the threat actor tries to use the password that they've acquired from the deep web onto your different properties, you have the ability to say no, right? Because you're getting the code on your phone. There's also authenticator apps. I like Microsoft's Authenticator, where you have to type in a 6-digit code in order to get into it, and it changes every minute. We're also thinking a lot about fungible security tokens, which are security tokens that change on a random basis. We at SKADI are thinking about this a lot. How do we make fungible security tokens something that can be used by everyone? It's quite complicated and deals with the blockchain that Bitcoin uses as their ledger. But there's kind of some new cool technology that comes out. So that's one thing. Your cell phone is an interesting aspect of these things because there's a lot of different kinds of threats that happen with your cell phone. I wouldn't say that just because you're sent a text message, you're going to get compromised, even if you don't do anything. But if you do click the link, you really just should be deleting them. I tell everybody in my family, my friends, and colleagues and people that I meet that, it's really good when you see a link to just take some pause and really think about what you're doing. There's nothing in this world that is urgent or that urgent that you have to click now. Purelator text message you and says, we can't deliver a package to you.
That's a common one that I see.
Right, yeah, right. And so you have to sit back for a minute and say, well, am I expecting a package? What kind of things would I be expecting? Do I really need to worry about this? You could even pick up the phone and call Purelator and say, are you sending me a package? I just got this text message. That way you don't click a link and get hit with all kinds of stuff. So, it's just about taking pause, thinking really cerebrally about what you're doing and how you're handling that, for sure.
If I reply to a text message, though, without clicking on a link,
right.
have I exposed myself? Other than the scam of trying to get me to give them money?
Yeah, well, you're telling the threat actor that you exist, right? So if you delete it, they don't, they send out thousands of these messages at a time. If you respond to it, what you're saying to them is, oh, I've just verified that you're legitimate, right? Even if you respond with some epithet, right? Like, whatever that is.
They just know that there's someone living behind that door.
Yeah, exactly. And so I advise people, if you get those messages, just delete them, because that's the smartest thing to do. Then they think it's a dead line. They won't they won't continue to bother you. There's also some kind of cool apps that you can get that filter some of this stuff for you. I have no monetary investment in this company whatsoever. I use an app called YouMail, which is great, YOU Mail, because it allows, it uses threat intelligence to stop your phone from getting these emails and stuff. Also, Apple and Google have been getting a lot better about dealing with these kinds of threats too.
Very important advice for people with elderly parents and others in their care, because they have access to the phones, and they'll answer anything.
Yeah, and they're really susceptible too. I'll tell you a little bit of a story that I just told yesterday. I gave 8 classes in Gravenhurst to seniors to help them protect themselves against cyber threat. And the very first thing I did when I got into the room is I just said, I want to get to know you. And I started asking them questions. Where were you born? What street did you grow up on? What's your mother's maiden name? Yeah. What was the name of what kind of first car did you have? They were very effusive about wanting to tell me all this information. And when we got done, I said to them, well, the information that you gave me so freely, because we as human beings want to communicate to one another, is the same information you're using when you have those questions that are asked. What street did you grow up on? What's your mother's maiden name? Et cetera, et cetera. So you just have to be more cognizant about how you're answering those questions, how you're doing things, because social engineering is a huge thing, and that exercise that I did with them was a social engineering exercise. Senior citizens especially vulnerable to this.
Very interesting. Have you got any other ideas on how you're going to access IION funding? Have you? What's the next thing for you guys?
Well, I would like $1 million to...
Yeah, you and me both.
or your social insurance number. One of the other.
Yeah, she's going to ask me several questions.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that there's... we accessed IION funding to build our trade show booths, because as you can imagine, we can take clients from anywhere in the world. I will take clients from anywhere, as long as it's not illegal for me to do so. So I can't, take clients from sanctioned countries as an example. Or I won't take clients that are running unscrupulous businesses. So for me, having trade show booths that we can go and show what SKADI is about to various places that we go, because we're constantly going to trade shows, was really helpful to us. And Matt and I worked together on a proposal to receive funding, and that funding was extremely helpful to us. We built 2 really excellent trade show booths with that.
It's fantastic to hear, and I know, just given what you're doing and the complexity of the constant updates to your technology and service that you're providing, I think there'll be countless other opportunities where we're able to provide support, and if not us, a connection, introductions. I know I've kind of been. No, I don't. I hope I haven't been bombarding you, but here and there, I'll send you some opportunities that come across our desk as well that I think you may be interested in. That's one thing that I'm trying to, get across in this IION series is, that sure, we have some capital opportunities, but we also provide connections to other industry professionals that can help you in your journey as well.
Yeah, and I will tell you, having access to funding is so important, especially in the cybersecurity space. When you're starting a cybersecurity firm, there is an enormous amount of expense up front, and you can take out loans from places like BDC and help get funding. But there's really not a lot of funding out there to support companies who are on the front line of cyber threat. And we have been very vocal about talking to the government about helping to support companies like mine and other companies who are really doing the grunt work in terms of getting out there and protecting people from cyber threat. And so it's not a criticism whatsoever, but I do think our government has to take a more proactive role in supporting organizations who are taking care of cyber threat. I will say also, one of my dreams this year, I really want to start a foundation to help people who have been the victims of cybercrime. Because, you report a cybercrime to the police, you lose your funding, not your funding, but you lose your retirement, you are devastated by cybercrime, but there's not a lot of support out there. You can report it to the police. The police might get to it when they can. There's no chance that they're ever going to catch the criminal because they're overseas somewhere. Once in a great while, you'll have a local person who gets arrested for doing that, but that's rare. So these people need support. And one of my goals for the next year or two is to open an organization where people can get support when they have been the victims of cybersecurity crime.
I'm learning a lot as we go about this process as well. IION, we are sector agnostic, so we help companies in every sector at every stage. It's easier, obviously, to help an established company, and by easier, I mean less time consuming. If I'm being honest, as you're well aware, just, as a startup, it's a tremendous amount of work to get that up off the ground. Not that it isn't a tremendous amount of work to continue to run it, but just, what needs to be done at the initial stages is just leaps and bounds more time consuming, or time consuming in general. But IION is looking forward to supporting you and SKADI to your other stages of your business development journey and where you're going as well. So I think this is just...
Am I able to give a shout out to your listeners?
Yeah.
If you're in need of cybersecurity and you're a small business, whether you have 1 computer or 700 computers, please feel free to reach out to me, even if it's just for a conversation. We can be reached at skadicyber.com, SKADI Cyber, CYBER.com, or Rachel, RACHEL.Clark, CLARK, at SKADICyber.com.
I think that's the other value of dealing with IION is you're now one of the vast network of businesses, and I can imagine you're going to be telling a whole bunch of people about what's available close by.
I mean, I think, well, of course, we try to promote, the clients that we have, and if they're not clients, local companies that are supplying services that perhaps can be found elsewhere in Ontario, hopefully, and if not Ontario, Canada, as a whole. But of course, if they're clients, we will never, promote one company over another. That's completely up to whomever is looking for said service. But of course, if there's an opportunity to, for companies to come and use a local client as a cyber defense security, as opposed to a GTA company, for example, just given our proximity and location, absolutely. And not just for this particular episode, but for everything in general. If we can help dollars stay local as well, in terms of like a multiplier effect, that's part of the reason as well. Let's help to support one another in this community and ecosystem as well.
Yeah, our goal here is to create tech jobs in Northern Ontario. And through the pandemic, a lot of folks who are tech-based moved up here because they no longer had to really go into the office during the pandemic. So there's a plethora of talent up here. We want jobs to be here. We want Northern Ontario to be a place for cybersecurity. There's many, many reasons for that to happen. So I'm hoping that I can at least be a small part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we look forward to it.
Yeah, ditto.